According to Ruth Ginsburg, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. And honestly, that quote makes us ask, why did women have to fight for a seat at the table in the first place? Because if we look back at history, women were not always given the same rights, opportunities that many of us have today. For centuries, women were told what they could and could not do. Vote, not allowed. Lead, too controversial. Make their own choices? Well, society had a lot to say about that. But here's the thing, these rights were not just magically given overnight. They came from years of protests, activism, and women who decided, okay, enough is enough. And that brings us to our topic today, feminism. So, what exactly is feminism? Feminism. Sounds like a very complicated word, right? But at its core, feminism is simply the belief that women and men deserve equal rights, opportunities, and treatment. It challenges gender inequality and asks one important question: why would someone's opportunities be limited because of their gender? Now, feminism is not just one single movement. Over time, the issues women fought for changed, and because of that, feminism developed into what we call the four waves of feminism. Four waves, four different periods, four different sets of challenges. So today, we're going back in time and explore how each wave changed history and how these changes influenced the way women are represented in media. Alright, let's start where everything began. Okay, our first stop, the first wave of feminism. And our first question is, every citizen deserves a voice. So why were women denied one for so long? The first wave lasted from 1848 to 1920, and it focused mainly on women's legal and political rights, especially one major issue, the right to vote. Voting rights. Suffrage. Suffrage means the right to vote. The movement officially began with the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, where women gathered to publicly demand equality through the Declaration of Sentiments. After more than 70 years of activism, a major victory finally happened when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, giving many women the right to vote. But this progress did not include everyone equally. Many women of color continued to face discrimination and barriers that prevented them from fully exercising their voting rights. Now, after learning history, let us learn how this movement appears in media. One example is the documentary The Vote.
It had been the opening act in what proved to be an epic struggle for equality, a crusade carried out by millions of women.
What makes this documentary interesting is that it doesn't just give us dates and facts. It shows the actual struggles behind the movement. We see women organizing marches, facing imprisonment, and even going on hunger strikes to demand their right to vote. But the documentary also shows that the movement had its own problem. While women were fighting for equality, many women of color were still being excluded from the progress being made. So, how did the first wave change gender representation in media? It introduced a new image of women. Women were no longer only shown through traditional roles like mothers or wives. They were also represented as citizens, activists, and people who could influence society. And that was the beginning of a much bigger conversation about women's rights. Okay, so after women gained the right to vote, you might think, great, problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. Getting the right to vote was a huge achievement, but women were still facing inequality in their everyday lives. And this led to the second wave of feminism, which lasted from 1963 to the 1980s. While the first wave focused mainly on legal rights, the second wave expanded the conversation by asking what about equality in our homes, workplaces, and personal lives? So this movement was influenced by other social movements like civil rights movement and protests against the Vietnam War. It encouraged women to challenge traditional gender roles and question the expectations placed on them. One important figure during this period was Betty Friedan. His book, The Feminine Mystique, discussed the frustrations of women who felt limited to being housewives and homemakers. The movement, led by figures like Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug, fought for issues like workplace equality, protection against discrimination, and reproductive rights. So this period achieved important changes like Equal Pay Act, but the movement also had its limitations. For example, many women of color felt that their experiences were not fully represented. Now, let's see how these ideas appear in the field of media. One example is the Filipino film, Brutal. So how does Brutal connect to feminism? The film was one of the first Filipino films to address rape as a feminist issue. Instead of treating violence as something that should remain private, it presents it as a larger social problem. And through Monica's character, women are shown not only as victims, but as individuals with their own voices, struggles, and experiences. Another example is Minamahal, isang daang bulaklak para kay Luna. Although the film is not entirely about feminism, some scenes reflect second wave themes like women's independence and domestic violence. In some scenes, we can see Luna working to support her mother who experiences abuse. And the film showed that domestic abuse is a social issue that deserves attention. One more memorable event is when her lover, Rafi, tells her,
Go! Make all your dreams come true without me! Total! Ever since pili mo, strong na panawangan ka!
and that one line actually shows something important. Women who try to become independent are sometimes criticized for challenging traditional expectations. All in all, the second wave changed media representation by showing women as more than just wives, mothers, or supporting characters. Women began to be represented as people with their own goals, struggles, and choices. Okay, so after the second wave, feminism reached another turning point. Women were already fighting for equality, but came a new question. Whose voices are we actually hearing? And that question opened the door to the third wave of feminism, which emerged in the 1990s. Now, the third wave introduced an important idea. Feminism is not a one-size-fits-all movement. Because the truth is, women do not experience inequality in the same way. A woman's race, culture, class, and identity can shape the challenges she faces. Basically, there is no single story that represents every woman's experience. The movement was also influenced by events like Anita Hill's testimony against Clarence Thomas, which encouraged more women to speak up about issues like sexual harassment and discrimination. Now, let's see how these ideas show up in media. And of course, I had to include a C-drama example because why not? We love a strong female lead. The Chinese drama Legend of the Female General tells the story of Haeyeon, a woman who challenged expectations and proves herself as a skilled soldier and respected general. So how does feminism appear in this series? Haeyeon challenges the idea that strength, leadership, and courage are only reserved for men. Even when society places limits on her because of her gender, she proves that her ability is not determined by whether someone is male or female. Her story also reflects the third wave's focus on identity and self-determination. Instead of simply accepting the roles society expects from her, Haeyeon chooses her own path and decides who she wants to become. And this is where we can see the impact of the third wave on media. Women in media became more than just one stereotype. They were no longer limited to being only the love interest, the side character, or the perfect woman. They became more diverse, complex, and independent, with their own goals, struggles, and identities. Because at the end of the day, women are not just one story. They are many stories. And now we have reached the wave that probably feels the most familiar to us, because at this time feminism entered a new space that we almost use every day: social media. The fourth wave of feminism, which began in the 2010s and continues today, is strongly connected to digital activism. Instead of only relying on traditional protests, people began using hashtags, online platforms, and digital communities to speak up and demand change. One major example is the hashtag #MeToo movement, where women shared their experiences with sexual harassment and abuse while calling for accountability. The fourth wave also continues the idea that feminism is not a one-size-fits-all experience. Different women experience inequality in different ways, which is why the movement focuses on amplifying diverse voices. Now let's look at a Philippine example. During a House hearing before, Quezon City Representative Bong Santay received criticism after making comments about actress Ann Curtis that many viewed as inappropriate and objectifying. So, how does this connect to fourth wave feminism? The issue reflects how people today use digital platforms to challenge harmful comments about women and hold public figures accountable. Through social media, conversations about respect, representation, and the way women are treated can reach wider audiences. So, how did the fourth wave influence media representation of women? The fourth wave changed the way women's voices are seen in media. Women are no longer just represented by what others say about them. They are also able to speak for themselves, share their experiences, and participate in conversations that can shape society.